Welcome to the Conservation Efforts Database webinar. My name is Leif Wickman, and today I'll be joined by Matt Heller and Justin Welty. And today we're going to demonstrate how you can enter data in the CED using our single record entry functionality. If you have questions, we ask that you hold those questions until the end of the presentation, and we can go back to any step or slide that you may have questions about. Before we walk you through the process, let's take a moment to explain the options for data entry and the types or categories of information you may have to provide. We have two methods for data entry. One is single record. That's using the CED's user interface to enter each record one by one. We also have a batch upload template, which allows you to enter many records in an easier fashion. Each has unique advantages, and the method you choose should largely depend on the amount of data you have to enter and whether you have an existing database that can be used to populate the batch upload template. While there are no restrictions to using either method, we encourage users with more than 100 records to consider using the batch upload method, as it may save you some time. Single record entry allows the user to easily navigate through each record and can be a time saver if you do not have a lot of spatial entries. Speaking of spatial entries, we categorize conservation efforts into three categories: spatial activities, non-spatial activities, and non-spatial plans. The first part of those labels are to let the user know whether the CED will require spatially explicit data or spatially aggregated in case of private lands. Non-spatial is actually more like semi-spatial in that the CED will still collect some course level information about your geographic location, like the state, but won't ask for spatially explicit polygons. Non-spatial plans are just that, the category in which the CED collects information on plans and strategies. These documents often direct conservation, but are not the type of boots-on-the-ground activities or treatments that the CED is focused on collecting. Lastly, you'll see that we break apart public and private lands. On public lands, we're asking for spatially explicit information for applicable subactivities, while understanding that we need to protect private landowner information and location. Therefore, we're currently working with the USGS and states to utilize a reporting unit that is large enough to obscure and protect those landowner locations while being small enough to be biologically meaningful and useful. As you can see on the slide, those units are still in development, and we will provide a separate training on how to upload data using those reporting units as soon as they're available. We'll cover how to use the batch upload method in a separate webinar. For this webinar, we're going to focus on and demonstrate how to enter spatial records using the single record entry method. The data steps are designed to walk the user through the data upload process with minimal effort. Only required fields will be displayed, so if you don't see a field, it doesn't require a valuable for that specific subactivity. As we begin with location information, users entering spatial data will have state and county pre-populated for them on that page. Those entering non-spatial data will need to manually populate those values. In general, spatial entries require the most data, followed by non-spatial entries, and finally, non-spatial plans require the least amount of data entry. To get started, you'll first need to log in. If you don't know how to log in or haven't registered for a user profile, please see our training webinar that covers registration and a tour of the CED. After you've logged into the CED, you can either select the Home tab, or under the Users drop-down menu, you can find a list of options, and you'll see an option to enter data or provide data. Either selection will bring you to the page that provides the aforementioned options. Those options are listed here. The menu options you see here will provide you with quick links to edit and review existing entries and/or return to records that you have begun entering, but had to save and step away. In the webinar, we're going to focus on this top option, Create New Project. Before we move on, please note that the CED uses the term project in a general sense. We are looking for treatment level information and spatial data tied to those treatments. We understand that some partner agencies use the term project to group a number of treatments, but again, we're looking for information on treatments. So here we are at the welcome page for the CED. You'll notice that here on the home page, you have an option to provide data using single record entry. Also, under each user's home page, you'll see that you have some options including enter data. Either selecting enter data here or provide data here will bring you to this next page, which provides again that same list of menu options. We'll choose create a new project, and that'll bring us to step 1, create new project or effort. Before you begin to populate the fields in step 1, we'd like to draw your attention to a few statements we have here. Notably, you cannot return to this page. Any updates to the fields below need to be made in the upcoming steps. The option to save and continue will also not appear until all these fields have been populated. Please complete all of the fields in their presented order, or the save and continue button may not appear. When naming a project, please avoid using private landowner names or locations, names of ranches, or other things that may identify where a particular treatment is occurring. And specifically for spatial projects, if your feature fails to upload within the footprint editor, it could be due to overlapping vertices. Try buffering your feature by 1/10 of a meter and try again. Now, in the CED user manual, we provide tables which list all of the activities and sub-activities. But for quick reference, we've included a drop-down option so you can see the organizational structure of our activities and sub-activities. These are all the various combinations you have at your disposal. If you're unsure of which activity and sub-activity combination your effort should be recorded under, feel free to contact the CED team for assistance. Let's get started. So under the CED effort name, we've entered in a title of Training Demo Conifer Removal 2018. Next, we'll go on to our effort status. This is to identify essentially the implementation status. Is it in progress or is it completed? For this demonstration, we'll say that it's completed. Now we'll choose the sub-activity, and you'll see again your options here. Depending on the option you choose, if we choose conifer removal, you'll see down here a notice that says you are creating a spatial project. Spatial data is required. As opposed to other ones, such as livestock and rangeland management, this is a non-spatial project. You can only load spatial data as PDF maps in the documentation, which we'll cover later. For things like your plans, regulatory mechanism, after you select a sub-activity, you'll see here another notice that says you are creating a non-spatial plan. And just like the other one, you can only load spatial data as PDF maps in the documentation. So those are kind of your options to help let you know what type of information is going to be needed. We're going to go back to conifer removal, and in this particular activity, there is only one sub-activity. It's conifer removal. Now, you'll see that implementing party, office, and date created are already populated. The first two, implementing party and office, are tied to your user profile. Date created is automatically entered by the database itself. After you've entered all this information, select Save and Continue to advance to step 2, where we will provide your location information. And so here's another refresher of the steps included in step 1. Again, we showed you how to enter a name, populate your effort status, and select your activity and subactivity. The other three items, implementing party, office, and date, as I mentioned, are tied to your profile. Again, please read those attention statements. After hitting save and continue, you'll have been brought to the CED's new and improved footprint editor. Had we selected a non-spatial subactivity or plan, the CED would route us around this step, again, as spatially explicit information is not required. If you would like to include maps, as I mentioned, we'll show you how to do that in step 3 later in the presentation. Now that we're stepping into the footprint editor, I'll turn it over to Matt Heller, who's going to describe the basic features and how you can use the footprint editor to draw, edit, and upload spatial data.
Well, thank you, Leif. Yeah, we'll be going over the new footprint editor, and this part we'll be talking about tool basics, drawing polygons, editing polygons, erasing polygons, and then we'll go into cut, union, and reshaping these polygons, and then we'll get into uploading polygons. So I've said the word polygons quite a bit. That could be also said as a conservation effort boundary or an area. So one thing to note is we are no longer entering in points or lines. We are only going to represent conservation effort areas represented by what we call polygons. Now I'll cut over to the live demo. So as far as the footprinter basics goes, we created this new tool here to be customized for the CED user experience. Also, it helps with the CED administration for us on the team of the administrators. We were using a more generic tool before. So this new tool has your standard panning, which you can hold down your mouse, and zooming by using the roller mouse or the 2 zoom buttons. Or a trick that I like to show people is if you hold down the shift key and then use your left mouse to make a box, you can zoom into that area too. So also for navigating this map, there is the ability to change the base map layers. And this can get very handy. This can be handy when you're digitizing, when you're sketching in new boundaries. We have many to choose from there. I'm going to go back to the topographic. You can also turn on and off previously approved CED points, lines, and polygons. So we can turn all those on and off that can help with giving some context. Now we'll get into the drawing polygons or the sketching these conservation effort areas. To start out with, you simply click the Start Drawing button in the upper right-hand corner. And now, when your mouse will say click to start drawing, you simply single click, and then you can continue clicking. I like to take my time when clicking because if you click too fast, sometimes bad things happen. And then when you're done, you simply double click. And you'll notice right away when you double click and stop your sketch, you get a pop-up that comes up that shows some read-only information. You can't edit any of this pop-up information, but you get some read-only information like the project ID, the date it was created, and then the date it was last updated. And when you have your area or your polygon selected, you'll have these grippers showing, and just like a lot of other drawing programs, you can drag that around as you want. So if you need to fine-tune it. So I'll go through the toolbar up here. One thing you can do is click on the left to unselect. I'm going to turn off all these context layers here, and I'm going to zoom into our area of interest. So if I want to select that polygon again, I can click this new selection tool, the little make a rectangle, and it selects it and shows it shown as blue when it's selected. If I don't want to have it selected anymore, I can clear the selection. I'm going to select it again. And if I want to bring up the attributes again, that read-only information in the pop-up, I can click the attributes tool. Next, I could delete it, but I don't want to do that quite yet. actually what I want to do is I'm going to show you a couple other tricks here. I'm going to draw another polygon. Let's say we didn't quite finish. We had some more areas to add. Now we have two overlapping ones. What we can do is combine those into one polygon by selecting them both. And then there's a union tool. If you click that, it makes it one nice happy polygon. We can also select that polygon and reshape it by clicking outside the polygon and then clicking in how we want to reshape, and then finish the sketch by clicking on the outside of the polygon. That takes a couple of little steps to get the hang of, but once you do, it's very, very useful. If we didn't like what we just did, we can undo. Or if we made a mistake undoing, we can redo. We can also split this into separate polygons by using the cut tool. On anything that's selected, we can split that into two different areas. And now there's two different ways to delete polygons. One is to when you click the pop-up, you've probably been noticing from the start there's a little delete button. You can click delete and that removes the polygon. You can also delete a polygon using the toolbar, the red X. It's a good indication. So that is everything on the toolbar in drawing a polygon and deleting polygons. So next, a lot of you will have existing GIS layers that you want to use rather than sketching things out. That can save a lot of nice time. So what we've done is have the ability to upload a shapefile, which is a GIS layer for a file format. That file format, shapefile format, is pretty universal in the GIS world. It has been for a long time. And that shapefile must be zipped up into a zip format with a ZIP extension. And to do this, it's a pretty easy operation. Underneath the Add Zipped Up Shapefile heading, there's a button that says Choose File. Simply click that, navigate to the shapefile that you want that's already been zipped up. In this case, I have one that's called tempfootprinter.zip. And it loads the shapefile and it zooms to the area that was just uploaded. And you can see we have that pop-up that gives us some read-only information. And if we wanted to do some edits to it, we sure could. So when you're all done, you simply click the save and go to the next step. That will jump us to step 3. Now I do want to point out, if some of the steps in this video don't cover all your questions, you can also click the help button or the help link in the upper right hand corner, and that will bring up a help document. And this help document will be updated periodically for common issues that users come up with, so we have the best help resources as possible. Thank you. Now I'll turn it back over to, I'll turn it over to Justin. Thank you.
After you saved and exited the footprint editor, you'll be asked to review and complete the last fields for a location, including state, county, collaborating parties, and land ownership. One thing to remember, state and county will be auto-populated based on the spatial information you've provided. Also of note, when entering private lands efforts, you will not be required to provide county-level information. For both spatial and non-spatial projects, please review all state and county level information to ensure that the information is accurate and correct. As you move down this step, it is important to remember your collaborators. This important piece of information for filtering and reporting, but is also a key way in which the CED team and its partners can effectively QA/QC the data and reduce duplicate entries. Pre-entry coordination with your collaborating parties is encouraged to determine who is responsible for providing the information on various efforts. Finally, we understand that land ownership changes and sometimes frequently. We ask that to the best of your knowledge, you provide information on land ownership and/or surface managing agencies. As you can see when you enter the second part of Step 2 for spatial information, you will be shown a thumbprint of your spatial boundary. You can go and edit, change, or update the spatial boundary at any time simply by clicking on the Edit Spatial Data link here. As you go down the page, you can see again that the state and county information has been filled in for this polygon. As we continue to scroll down the page, you can check as many collaborators as are participating in this effort. Notice that as you check them, they appear above the menu to allow you to see in a list your selections. The same multiple select is true for land ownership, where you can select as many ownership agencies as is necessary, and their values appear above the multiple select list. When you have completed Step 2 and are ready to proceed on to Step 3, you'll notice we have navigation buttons in the top right and bottom right of your screen to allow you to go to the next step, to review your entry, or to save and exit. These buttons will change depending on the step you are on to give you different options at different times. With that, let's move on to Step 3, which is the activity information. As we move forward with Step 3, you'll notice that many of these fields are self-explanatory. In addition, we have help guides and user manuals that define these fields for you. I do want to draw your attention to a warning that appears should the user-defined or reported acreage totals differ from the GIS calculated acres. You will see a warning that says, reported acreage metric value is X number of acres based on the GIS calculation, and a certain percentage less or greater than your GIS calculated acreage represented by your spatial input. Please ensure these values represent the correct area where the conservation action was implemented. We caution including adjacent acres that may have received indirect benefit if they are not included in the project or treatment area. In other words, we would like your GIS acres and your reported acres to match as closely as possible. This is important as the CD automatically calculates the amount of overlap with resource values and other layers of interest. If the GIS calculated acres are more than what's reported or treated, it will inflate the actual amount of acres treated. In addition, there are other fields in Step 3 that are important for the completion of the effort, including the start and end dates, the notes, documentation that you can upload, and the threats addressed. And let's review those in the live demonstration. As we move on to Step 3, you'll notice that there's a lot of data in here to fill out. And let's start with editing the name. You can change the name of your activity at any time. However, you'll notice the activity and subactivity are set. These cannot be altered. If you made a mistake in your activity and subactivity, you will need to delete the effort and create a new one. To delete an effort, check the box that marks this effort for deletion and submit it on to your approving official. Again, just walk you through the fields. They're best entered in the order that they're presented. You can enter start and end dates. You can enter your reported acres here. And again, you'll notice this value or this error will change based on the number of acres that I enter in the box. So now it's within the range that we have decided is acceptable and the error goes away. After recording the basic information like dates and acres, the next step is to upload documentation associated with your project. To do so, you can use the Choose Files button here to open up the standard file dialog and select one or more documents. To save time, in this case, we've uploaded an example document here. Once the documents are uploaded, you'll need to choose their file type and give it a document description. Once the data are saved, you can either download or delete individual records by clicking the buttons to the right of the specific file. And finally, after uploading your documentation, you need to go and indicate the threats addressed for your effort. As you can see, we have multiple threats that can be addressed for your particular effort. We ask that you only check the ones that are applicable to your effort. and indicate how you ameliorated or addressed these threats in the following section called Implementation, which Leif will now demonstrate.
Thanks, Justin. In step 4, we fill in the information about implementation, methods, and effectiveness. We'll start with the objectives and the associated methodology. We'll move into part 2, status, and 3, effectiveness. And we're back into the CED's user interface here on step 4. Drawing your attention to the top of the page, you can see that we have implementation information, part 1, objectives and methods. Now, throughout the CED, on certain activities and sub-activities, we have added help options, info bubbles, if you will, to help guide your selections. In this one, being we're talking about conifer removal, we reiterate the terminology that we're using, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, as well as where we're getting that information. Here, you'll see the available objectives you have to select from for conifer removal. For this one, we'll say that we were looking to reduce conifer cover in and adjacent to sagebrush habitat to reduce the negative impacts on sage-grouse demography. If you have other information you'd like to enter about objectiveness, we have a text box here for your use. As you move down, you can see methodology. So we have chaining, hand thinning, lop and scatter, etc. These methods, of course, will change based on the sub-activity and activities that you choose. If you have other information on effectiveness, again, we always allow a text box here. I will draw your attention to the choices of other here in objectives, as well as other here in methods. If you select those, we require that you provide some text so we know what you're talking about. Additionally, you can select multiple options if you have more than one objective, or if you had more than one method. So we'll select hand thinning and we'll continue to move down. Status. You'll see that your status, your implementation status, that is, has carried over from part 1, step 1. Then you can move on down to part 3, where we talk about effectiveness information. Again, we have information bubbles here. We encourage you to read and review all that information, as it will help you select the appropriate option. Here are some conifer effectiveness notes. Depending on the activity and the time that has passed, you could see 2 to 3 options under effective. Here we're seeing 2. Effort has a high likelihood of being effective given adequate time, and effort is uncertain or unlikely to be effective. There are some sub-activities that are deemed effective upon implementation, such as conservation easements. I won't go through the exhaustive list here, but if you feel that you've selected an objective with an associated methodology and enough time has passed, you can also provide us with information that would support why a particular treatment has been effective. For this one, we're going to say that the effort has a high likelihood of being effective given adequate time. After you select that, you'll see that the effectiveness statements automatically pop up for your choosing. We'll say that methods have demonstrated success for the ecological site potential and current conditions at the site. We'll also ask you to cite literature sources or technical guidance. I won't go through that here for the demonstration, but it's pretty self-explanatory. Now, these are questions that we ask to further enforce whether or not an effort can be deemed effective. Describe how the conservation effort reduces the threats. Let's say for a moment on the previous step we did that. Provide incremental objectives and dates for achieving them. Let's say we did that as well. Provide quantifiable performance measures to monitor both implementation and effectiveness. This is getting at, are you doing post-treatment monitoring? And lastly, are you incorporating the principles of adaptive management, i.e. corrective management strategies? We're going to say yes to this as well. After you've completed all the information on this page, again, you can go back to step 3 or advance to step 5, which is the same as the review entry page. So now we'll review step 5, effort review and error check. In this step, you can review all of the information that you've entered in for a record and navigate to any step where you've previously entered information. You'll also have an opportunity to save and exit if you'd like to return to the record and make edits. You also have the option to save and submit. And when we say that, we mean save and submit and send to your approving official for review. At that point, your approving official will be able to review your entry or entries and submit them officially to the CED to become part of the CED's data set. Again, information is carried throughout. So you'll see the user, the email address, the agency, and approving official tied to that user. You'll also see the information provided on our Step 4 implementation information. Now, you'll see options here, delete effort and approve effort, that will not be available to each user. Those options are only available to approving officials. After you've reviewed all the information and all your required fields are populated, you have two choices. Once again, as Justin mentioned earlier, you can save and exit and return to the effort, or if you're ready to submit it for approval from your approving official, you can hit Save and Submit for approval. Upon hitting Save and Submit for approval, you'll see an error warning that tells us we don't have all of our required fields populated. We're going to have to go back and populate those fields. Go back to the review entry. You can see that collaborators is no longer highlighted. At this point, we'll again attempt to save and submit for approval. And you'll see a notice that says your project has been successfully saved. An email will be automatically generated from the Conservation Efforts database to your approving official. If your approving official indicates that they have not received an email, they may need to check their spam or junk folders. This concludes our training webinar showing you how to navigate the single record data entry page. For more information, please visit us at conservationefforts.org. Thanks.